for Manhattan Borough President, and I want to thank everyone joining us. I know that this issue of ranked choice voting is certainly on everyone's mind, and there have been a lot of forums. But to be honest with you, I've been on some of them, and you really can't get enough information to understand it. So each time I learn more, and I particularly want to thank the speakers, and I'll introduce them in a minute. I must admit, as Sean knows, he and I were on a forum together, and they had a big sign up on it. We'll talk about it later, saying, Gail Brewer introduces legislation, and the entire Zoom, except for Sean and I Sean and me was against ranked choice voting. So it was quite an interesting perspective, but I did. And then the issue went to the Charter Revision Commission. This was a charter revision commission that was not just the mayor. It included controller, public advocate, borough presidents, and city council, which to me is how you're supposed to do a charter revision commission. And of course, people voted on it a couple of Novembers ago. And 75% of the population voted for it. I'm not sure that a lot of people knew what they were voting for, I'll be honest with you, but I do think it makes sense, and I'll tell you why. You'll hear more what is known as RCV. It means that no candidate will win unless they have at least 51% of the votes cast. And the issue for me is also interesting. I remember couple of races, public advocate in particular, where there was a runoff, and it did cost us $15 million and a very small number of people. I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume, given so many, these would be citywide, not the locals. I would assume, I don't know for sure, that either in the controller or the mayor, that if in fact there was a runoff because we didn't have ranked choice voting, we might end up with the runoff because persons wouldn't get the requisite amount of votes, and then you'd end up with a runoff. I don't know for sure, but we could be saving money with ranked choice voting, and $15 million is no small amount of funding. I also want to say that it's important because you hear that candidates won't attack their opponent. I'm not sure that's true, but I think if they want to get elected, they might want to think twice about attacking each other. Now I know that that's part of politics. I've been in it for a long time, and I think what we might want to hear today is some of the strategies. People, you know how West Siders are. They stop me in front of Fairway and they want to know the strategy for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For God's sake, they want to understand that, not just how they vote, but the strategies, and that's obviously something that is a little bit nuanced. But I really look forward, and I hope that as a result, we get more candidates who are women, African American, Latinx, Asian, LGBTQ, trans, groups that are not normally part of at the table in terms of city government. And of course, we would hope that there are more women. I think there will be, at least in the city council, because there are a lot of women running. These panelists, we're really fortunate to have them today. First of all, they are busy and they're giving their time. They understand exactly what is needed in the upcoming election. And I know that we'll have lots of time for questions. So why don't we get started? I wish I had gone to to view the special elections, but they were in those other boroughs. And I don't go to those other boroughs. I stay in Manhattan. So I was loving watching on television that they look like bins. And of course they were counting them by hand. And so I watched, pieces of paper or something going into each one of it. It looked like a laundry basket or something. I do hope that the software is available, because otherwise 450 candidates is an awful lot of hand counting. But I am assured that there will be the software available so that it will be a much easier process come June 22nd. So I really am honored. Rose Pierre-Louis, as we know, is a former deputy borough president in the borough of Manhattan. And she has really dedicated her career to finding access to justice services and support. Currently, she is the COO, Chief Operating Officer, at something very special. If you don't know it, you should look it up, the McSilver Institute. And I've had the honor of participating, I think, in some census discussions, but more importantly, seeing the amazing policy work that the McSilver Institute does to make sure that those who are not part of the table setting, so to speak, are, and what is involved in terms of poverty and those who need to be part of policy decision making. She was also the Gender Equity Commission commissioner under Mayor de Blasio, and very, very instrumental in his domestic violence. So I want to say she's also, as I understand it, and I think this is really exciting, soon to be chair or president of a political club, which is the harbor of intrigue on the Upper West Side. I can tell you that from personal experience, and it's not an easy job. So I'm so happy that she is going to have it, because it'll make it more of an open, transparent discussion. So without further ado, Rose Pierre-Louis, and I thank you so much for joining us to talk about ranked choice voting. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks so much for having me, Borough President Brewer. I'm not sure, are we doing a presentation first, or?
Yeah, so the presentation, we'll do 3 presentations, and then I know there'll be a million questions.
Okay.
People can put them in the chat, they can raise their hands, or they can just, we'll figure out a way of making sure all your questions are answered. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sean, are you doing the presentation?
I am not. I believe Amanda is.
Amanda's gonna do it. Yeah, so, we'll just talk about the issue as you understand it. That'd be great.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with all of you, and certainly, Gail, thank you for your work on this issue. And I'm glad that you were the one that presented this. I think it is one of the most exciting things to happen. It's a pro-voter, piece of legislation that went into effect on January 1st, 2021. I think there's been a lot of discussion about, people be confused. What we have found through our work with Rank the Vote NYC, which I have the opportunity to serve on the board and work closely with Sean and Debbie, and certainly with Amanda over at the CFB, is that people get it. We've done exit polling for special elections that happened in Queens and the Bronx, and people are open to it. And certainly, I think in some of the races, this idea of being collegial and, has gone out the window, but I think by and large, people have been, really respectful and focusing on expanding their base, especially since if you just think that you're gonna, count on your tried and true, you will not reach that threshold of 50% +1. So as always, excited for this conversation, and hopefully we'll get a chance to dispel many of the myths that are happening across New York City about ranked choice voting. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. So Sean Fugard is the Education Program Director at Rank the Vote NYC. He's worked at many, many nonprofit, good government, but more importantly, social justice organizations. And he has organized around issues like police accountability, expanded access to the ballot box, and obviously now ranked choice voting. He certainly is a social justice advocate, a community builder. And what I find amazing about him, because he and I were on a panel, as I indicated, where the audience was not supportive of ranked choice voting. And he was phenomenal, both making sure that people understood the issue, but also sort of, as Rose Pierre-Louis indicated, alleviating some of the concerns that are somewhat not correct in terms of the facts. And he was great at doing that. So I was completely impressed, but then he left, and then I was stuck, and I was not as good at all on dispelling the facts or on making sure that people had calmed down. In fact, that was terrible, to be honest with you. So I was so impressed with you, sir, and now we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. I think, first of all, thank you for having this forum this evening. I think I left after 3 hours in the hot seat. So I am thankful you were able to continue to represent for RCV and to be there to talk with folks. So I know we're going to have the presentation shortly on RCV, but I'll just add, ditto everything that Rose has said. I think it's important. So we as Rank the Vote NYC actually started over a year ago posting candidate training. And so we've trained nearly 300 campaigns across the city on how to run under ranked choice voting. And we're seeing the benefits of that citywide. Even if you look at just the mayoral contest, you see candidates holding events together, talking about issues together. You see a general change in how they refer to each other. I have yet to hear a mayoral candidate talk about their opponent. I have heard them talk about their fellow candidates. I've heard them talk about their colleagues, but just simple things like that, that change in tone is what we're seeing as one of the benefits of ranked choice voting. And so looking forward to talking a little bit more about some of the myths and some of the facts around ranked choice voting.
Okay, John, thank you very much. So Amanda Millot is Deputy Director of Public Affairs at the New York City Campaign Finance Board. And I know, Amanda, you're going to give a presentation, and I'm sure there'll be many questions afterwards. So go right ahead, and thank you for being here. And I'm sure you are all very, very busy. So I appreciate your time.
Sure thing. I'm really excited to be here. Just so you know a little bit about me, in my role, I oversee all of our public-facing work at the Campaign Finance Board. That includes managing our voter education and engagement efforts, as well as what we're doing to educate the public about ranked choice voting. Bear with me. I'm going to share my screen and pull up a presentation. Sometimes it takes me a minute to get everything up and going.
Looks great.
All right. Going to start from the beginning. Let's dive in. Let's talk about what ranked choice voting is going to be like here in New York City. I will try to preemptively answer as many questions as I can. I'm sure there will be questions at the end, and luckily we have an expert panel here to field those. For anyone who doesn't know about the Campaign Finance Board and NYC Votes, first off, the Campaign Finance Board administers New York City's public matching funds program. For candidates running for city office, we provide campaign finance disclosure to let you know what those people are raising and spending. And what I'm mostly here to talk to you about today is how we engage voters through our NYC Votes Initiative. We have a charter mandate to provide voter education, particularly to underrepresented populations. And then in addition to that, we had a charter mandate added to conduct a voter education and outreach campaign to voters about ranked choice voting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in the end. But why are we all here to begin with? The big election that we have coming up is the 2021 municipal election. This is a huge election where we have open seats for mayor and comptroller. All the borough presidents are up for election, 51 city council offices. It is the biggest election we've had in 20 years. We are going to go vote on June 22nd. Early voting kicks off on June 12th through June 20th. And as I mentioned, we have city offices on the ballot for mayor, comptroller, public advocate, borough president, and city council. We also have other offices on the ballot that are not city level offices, such as district attorney, district leader, judges, and judicial convention nominees. So depending on what district you're in, you might see candidates on the ballot other than those city offices. And since you're in Manhattan, you're definitely going to see candidates for district attorney in June. Again, why is it so important that we vote, especially in this sort of uncertain time as we're living through the tail end of a pandemic, or what we hope is the tail end? Our future is really on the ballot this year, I think, and we're feeling that in a more immediate way than we ever have before. And we know that our city elected officials make laws that impact those key issues that affect our day-to-day lives, maybe even sometimes more than up in Albany or in Washington, D.C., we feel this on a day-to-day basis. And those lawmakers are tackling all issues, everything from healthcare and COVID-19 relief to affordable housing to racial justice and education to police and criminal justice reform. So before I dive into my ranked choice voting explanation, I'm going to show our 2-minute video. It's an explainer video that covers the basics of ranked choice voting, such as why we're using it, how to correctly cast your ballot, how to mark that ballot, how winners are decided, why you might want to rank candidates, and other important voter education, deadlines, and information. And then after I've shown that video, I'm going to explain even more and provide some additional context. So first off,
there's a new way for New Yorkers to have their say in city elections. A way that gives voters more choices and can lead to more diverse winners. It's called ranked choice voting. 74% of New York voters chose to use it in primary and special elections for city offices, mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council. You won't see ranked choice voting in general elections or elections for state or national offices. But in ranked choice voting elections, you can now rank up to 5 of your favorite candidates for each office. Here's how ranked choice voting works. On your ballot, you'll see candidates listed in rows and numbered rankings in columns. Pick your first choice and completely fill in the oval next to their name under the first column. Like always, you can just vote for your one favorite candidate and submit your ballot. But you might like several people. If you have a second choice, fill in the oval next to their name under the second column. Do the same thing for your third, fourth, and fifth choices if you have them. A few don'ts. Don't rank the same candidate more than once. It won't help them, and it takes away your chance to rank the others who are running. Don't give the same rank to multiple candidates. It could disqualify your ballot. Don't worry. This is a new process, and you can always ask a poll worker for help or for a new ballot if you make a mistake. So, how do ballots get counted with ranked choice voting? If one candidate gets more than 50% of everyone's first choice votes, they win the election right away. That's it. If no candidate gets more than 50%, ballots will be counted in rounds. Round by round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. So, if your top-rated candidate is eliminated, your vote goes to your next highest choice. This keeps going until only 2 candidates remain. The person with the most votes wins. Ranked choice voting is already popular in many cities around the country because voters find that it helps more voices be heard. Now it's our turn. Get answers to your questions and learn more at nyccfb.info/RCV.
all right, so that's our 2-minute version, but you're all here because you want the longer version. So I'm going to take a step back. Whoops. That went smoother than the very first time I played that video when I didn't know it was in the presentation and it just went off as a surprise. But let's talk about what is ranked choice voting. The video gets into a little bit, but it's a new way for voters to elect their representatives. So we're all used to choosing one person on our ballot. With ranked choice voting, we can rank up to 5 candidates in our order of preference. So I don't know if this happens to you. This happens to me all the time. Sometimes I like more than one person who's running in an election. Sometimes I like more than one person an awful lot, and I wish I could vote for multiple people and be like, oh, I really want to vote for my favorite candidate, but I like this candidate too. Ranked choice voting lets you do that. So I'm going to dive more into these concepts later on. But this gives voters more say in who wins. As mentioned at the beginning by others, it increases civility in elections, and it can lead to more diverse candidates winning. You're going to see I'm actually not making this up. We have learned this from how it works in other jurisdictions. And as Sean pointed out, we're actually already beginning to see how it's going to look here in New York City. So, as I mentioned, we are not, I'm very sorry to tell you, the first jurisdiction to ever use ranked choice voting. There are 17 cities across the United States that use this, including San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Santa Fe. Maine uses ranked choice voting on a statewide level, and Alaska just voted in 2020 to start using ranked choice voting at a state level as well. We also like to tell this to people that they actually use ranked choice voting at the Academy Awards. Of course, how you feel about that depends on how you feel about Best Picture winner. But all of this is to say ranked choice voting is not a new system. It is tried and tested in other places. We have learned from it. I think what's exciting here in New York City is we are going to be the biggest and most diverse jurisdiction to ever use ranked choice voting. So how did it even get here in the first place? For those of us who don't remember, because I don't know about you, but 2020 deleted a lot of information from my brain. But the 2019 Charter Revision Commission voted to create what was called Ballot Question 1. So this would establish ranked choice voting in primary and special elections for local offices, and it would go into effect on January 1st, 2021. As was mentioned at the beginning of this, almost 3/4 of New Yorkers voted yes on this, who voted on these ballot questions. 73.5% of New York City said, yes, I want ranked choice voting. I always say it's hard to get New Yorkers to agree that much on anything, but by and far across New York, a lot of people were strongly in favor of it. I really want to thank our friends at the Center for Urban Research at CUNY for lending us these maps so you can see what support looks like across the city. In this map in green, you see a lot of districts all across Manhattan, all across the Bronx, most of Queens, most of Brooklyn, and the north of Staten Island voted in support of ranked choice voting. There were some pockets of the city that were opposed to ranked choice voting, such as a couple of districts in Southeast Queens and South Brooklyn and a majority of Staten Island. But since you're in Manhattan, Manhattan was really strongly in favor of this. And this is just good to know of sort of like, how did this get here? We get that question from voters a lot because they want to know, why am I seeing this change on my ballot? The answer is because of voters like them. So here's your sort of cheat sheet of how this is going to look in elections. As I mentioned, this went into effect on January 1st, 2021. We've already had 4 special elections where this has been used. Those were in Queens and the Bronx. Just as a reminder, anyone can vote in special elections, but for primary elections, you can only vote in those elections if you're registered to the political party having that primary. So ranked choice voting is now going to be used in elections for all 5 city offices. So that's mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council. But just, you know, because we do get this question, we are not using ranked choice voting in general elections, even for those offices. We are not using ranked choice voting for federal or state races. So that's like president or governor or Congress. And we're not going to use ranked choice voting in local races like district attorney or judgeships. I'll mention this again later on, but this is good to know. Ranked choice voting contests will be on one side of your ballot, and any single choice elections will be on the other side of your ballot. So in Manhattan, your DA race is going to be on a different side of your ballot than, you know, your mayor, city council, things like that. So for voters, this is the most important thing to know. How do you mark your ballot? This is the sort of question we get a lot. So it's actually fairly intuitive, especially if you've ever taken a Scantron test. So you decide who your favorite candidate is. And then once you know who your first choice candidate is, be sure to mark in that first column on the line next to their name, fill the oval out completely that they are your first choice candidate. If you have a second choice candidate, maybe someone you really liked, but not as much as your favorite, you can fill out that oval under the second choice column on the line with their name. And you can do this for up to 5 candidates. You can still, you know, let's say you only like 2 or 3 candidates, you can rank 2 or 3 candidates. If you really prefer to only choose one, you can still vote for only one. But I think as I start to like dive a little bit deeper into how those votes get counted at the end, you might start to see why you want to make sure that your vote goes as far as it can. And that's how that tends to happen only when you're ranking all 5 choices. So we like to just tell people about ballot marking errors just so they're prepared before they go into the polling place. I am here to tell you voters make errors in every single election, but I'm just letting you know how it looks in a ranked choice voting election. The first type of error you can make as a voter is something called overvoting. Actually, overvoting happens in every election all the time. This is when you accidentally select more than one candidate for a particular office. In ranked choice voting, it's when you select more than one candidate for a particular rank. So the problem is when the Board of Elections goes to count your vote, it's not clear who you intended to vote for, and this will invalidate your ballot. So in this example we're showing here, the voter marked both candidate B and candidate C as their first choice vote. So when the Board of Elections goes to count that ballot, they don't know what the voter meant to do. So that ballot would be invalidated. If you're voting at the poll site, the machines are programmed to give you an error message so that you can go correct your ballot. So again, this tends to happen in every election. It's just a good thing to know to avoid. The other type of ballot marking error is duplicate ranking. So this is when you mark a candidate for more than one ranking. So in this example here, the voter marked candidate B as their first, second, third, fourth, and fifth choice. Clearly, they really like that candidate. In this example, only your top ranking for that candidate is going to count. Voting for them as your second choice, if you voted for them as your first choice, doesn't help your candidate. It doesn't invalidate your ballot, but it means that you're not getting the full benefits of ranked choice voting. If this candidate gets eliminated because they got the lowest number of votes, then your ballot is done. So I mentioned this earlier. This is where I'm going to dive more into the ranked choice voting counting process. As was mentioned at the beginning, it works a little differently in New York City than elsewhere because the people who created the policy really wanted to make sure that candidates are winning with a majority of the vote most of the time. So just like in a normal election, the Board of Elections goes to count the ballots once they receive them. What they're doing in a ranked choice voting system is counting those first choice votes. If a candidate receives more than 50% of first choice votes, they got a majority and they are the winner. They won that election with the majority of the vote. If no candidate gets to that 50% plus one marker, then voting will continue in rounds. And we're going to get into how that looks now. If it moves into rounds, what happens is the candidates with the fewest number of votes gets eliminated. They have lost the election, they can't win it, they get eliminated, and then the people who voted for that candidate first, their votes go to their next highest ranked candidate. So you're gonna see a little bit of what that looks like. So this process continues. You see who's the lowest vote getter, that candidate loses the election. For people who ranked candidates after that candidate, their votes get redistributed to the candidates that they chose next. This process continues until there are two candidates left in the race. We go all the way to the end in New York City, and then the candidate with the most votes at the end of the process wins. So I mentioned this earlier. What are reasons you might want to rank? First of all, making sure you're ranking up, especially up to 5 candidates, means that you have more say in who gets elected. So I'm going to use this example. I'm always in a district where I have multiple people running for office and maybe I like more than one of them. Sometimes as a voter, I have to think is my favorite candidate really going to win? Should I vote for this person? Ranked choice voting takes that sort of mental calculation away. I can go vote for my favorite candidate. And even if your favorite candidate or your top choice doesn't win, you can still ultimately choose who does win. Because if your first choice candidate gets eliminated, your vote goes to your second choice candidate. If that person gets eliminated, your vote goes to your third choice candidate and so on. And this is making sure that people are winning elections with as broad a coalition of voters as possible. As I mentioned, you can also make sure that you can vote for your favorite candidate without worrying, is that person really going to win? I like to talk about presidential primaries in this example, because you always see presidential primaries and there are always 15 people on a stage. And I always look at it and think, man, there's more than one person I would love to vote for. But I only get to pick one, and maybe my favorite candidate is polling very low and they're not going to make it all the way to the New York City primary. Maybe I have to choose someone different. In ranked choice voting, I don't have to think that way. I can just be like, who's my favorite? They're my first choice. and it takes away the strategy aspect. The second reason to really rank candidates is that voters end up hearing from more candidates. I know we talk about this a lot in terms of civility. Sometimes we face skepticism from New York City voters, and they're like, I don't believe candidates are going to be more civil to each other. I get it. Like, I've ridden on the subway too. But what we are finding, and we're seeing this in races across the city, is that candidates are starting to talk to groups of voters that they might not have talked to before. Candidates can no longer win office talking only to their base of voters or only to the groups that support them. They have more incentive to talk to more people, to hear about their issues, and to talk about issues that appeal to more people, to try to get, even if they're not getting people's first choice votes, to get their second choice votes, to get their third choice votes. So you may already be seeing this. I can especially think of it in the mayor's race, how like the mayoral candidates are going to talk to a bunch of different communities they might not have had to talk to before. Like maybe before people could have run for mayor with just like a few neighborhoods of support or something like that. And it becomes much harder to do that with ranked choice voting. Finally, and this is where I come back to what we've seen in other cities, and I know that Sean can probably speak to this much better than I can. And I know that the borough president mentioned this too. What we've seen in other places is that voters tend to elect more diverse candidates. New York City is the most diverse city in America. But that being said, you know, we still only have 17 out of 51 council members right now who are women. We have only ever had one person of color as mayor. Often women and candidates of color don't run or win in elected office at a citywide level. It looks really different in cities that have ranked choice voting. So for example, in Minneapolis, they elected their first 2 transgender council members just in their first year of using ranked choice voting. Women make up at least half of city legislatures in 7 of the cities that use ranked choice voting. So those cities are doing much better than we are. And in the 13 largest cities that use ranked choice voting, 6 have women mayors and 4 have Black, Latino, or Asian mayors. So they're already sort of beating New York City's record. And as I always say, I think we can do better. You know, that's one of the reasons that voters love living in New York City. It's something they really value. And it's really important to voters that the people who are in office really represent them. And that means looking like they do and understanding the issues that they care about. So here are the main takeaways. Here's what's really important to know before we dive into the question and answer portion, because I'm sure people have a lot of questions. First off, we love to set expectations. So the good thing about voting in a pandemic election is that all of us got used to using absentee ballots and to having to wait for results. We used to have the instant gratification of knowing on election night who won. That is no longer going to happen, both with an absentee voting system and with ranked choice voting. So the winner of some races might not be known on election night. The Board of Elections has to wait until all the absentee ballots come in. They collect those up to 7 to 13 days after the election. Once we get to the process where they're actually counting ballots with the software, it happens in a matter of minutes, but it's that matter of collecting ballots that takes a while. So it could be a couple weeks before we actually know who wins in some races. You know, I think in about 50% of races, you won't know the winner on election night. And in New York City, out of the 4 special elections we had, 3 went to ranked choice voting tabulations. So that is just, you know, a useful frame for when we can start to expect those results. Here's the takeaway for you as voters. Always remember, you can rank up to 5 candidates. You don't need to rank a total of 5 candidates. We recommend it just to make sure that your ballot goes as far as possible. You have as much say in electing the winner as you possibly can. But if you only like 1 candidate or prefer to vote for only 1, you can continue to do that. If you're like, oh, I really like 3 candidates, but I don't like 5, you can rank 3. Just be sure that if you're ranking only 1 candidate, you're making sure that you're filling that person in as your first choice candidate. Don't rank the same candidate more than once. It does not help that person. whatsoever, because once they get eliminated, your vote has nowhere to go if that happens. And remember, if you make any mistakes on your ballot, you can always ask a poll worker for another ballot, and they can help you out with that. So this is something, as I mentioned before, really important to know. Your ballot may have contests on both sides. In Manhattan, it will have contests on both sides. So remember, always flip your ballot over. Ranked choice voting elections will be on one side of the ballot and single choice contests will be on the other. We're also hearing that in some of the primaries, including Manhattan, ballots in the Democratic side may be multiple pages. So just be sure if you do even get a multiple page ballot, fill out every single page where you can fill it out. And make sure to scan both pages as well. Just a couple of dates and deadlines for you to know. As I mentioned before, in the primary elections, voters can only vote in those elections if they're registered to the party that's holding the primary. So May 28th is the last day for someone to register to vote if they're not already registered. If you aren't in a political party that's having a primary and you wanted to switch to one, unfortunately, that deadline has already passed. So when we're talking to people about filling out registration forms so they can vote in the primary, it's really for new voters. June 15th is your last day to request an absentee ballot. We put this major asterisk on there. This may change to June 7th. The legislature actually did pass legislation that would move the deadline from 7 days before the election to 15 days. That's been awaiting the governor's signature for a while, and we keep watching to see if he's going to sign that. So right now, the official deadline is June 15th. It might be moved up earlier. So we always recommend to people, if they want to vote absentee, request that as early as possible. And as I mentioned at the top, but it's always good to have a reminder, primary election day is on June 22nd. The 12th through the 20th is early voting. Early voting locations were just announced, and we have more early voting locations this election, which is really exciting. For all of you who maybe want something to look back to, you can find general voting information at voting.nyc. We have totally redesigned the voting.nyc site. That is going to launch this Friday. That will have our ranked choice voting video. It will have practice ballots. It's going to have a lot of information there. So I really recommend you check that out starting on Friday. You can also find our video, the one I played in this presentation, at youtube.com/user/NYCCFB. You can also check out any of our materials from our web pages, our frequently asked questions, one-pagers, any postcards, anything you want, at nyccfb.info/RCV resources. And we are also always posting on social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at NYC Votes. These are some links to our videos. I think we should email that around afterwards. I'm not going to try to read those links out. Just so you know, some things to look out for. As I mentioned, our new voting.nyc site, we are hitting the button on Thursday night so that the site will be live on Friday. That's going to coincide with an advertising campaign that's going to be pretty much everywhere directing everyone to voting.nyc, so I don't think you're going to be able to escape it. We also have the official Citywide Debates program is kicking off this week. We actually have a mayoral debate on New York 1 on May 13th. So I urge you to tune in to the Citywide Debates that we hold in mid-May. So probably in the last 2 weeks of May, check your mailboxes. You're gonna all be getting postcards with ranked choice voting information on them. We're mailing those to every single registered voter. Starting in the first week of June, although some people might actually get this before Memorial Day, you will also get voter guides in your mailboxes. Your voter guide is going to have all the candidates who are running for office who will appear on your ballot. It's also going to have a lot of ranked choice voting information in there. So I encourage you to check that out. We also have a companion on our website where we post our online voter guide and our video voter guide so you can get even more information. We also always encourage people to go check out the Board of Elections. My favorite site there is findmypollsite.vote.nyc. That's where you can look up your poll site, your early voting location, and a couple weeks before Election Day, they post sample ballots so you can see what your ballot's going to look like even before you go to the polls. If you want to request an absentee ballot, you can do so at nycabsentee.com. There's also a lot of information about voting and accessibility at vote.nyc/page/accessibility. And you can get information on Twitter and Instagram from the Board of Elections at BOE NYC. And that brings me to the very end. You can always reach out to the Campaign Finance Board with questions. You can reach us at nycvotes@nyccfb.info. That's our general inbox where we man all the time. But if you want to reach me directly, my email address is amellillo@nyccfb.info. I'm used to getting a lot of questions in my inbox. So if you have any after this presentation that you don't get a chance to ask, feel free to reach out. And with that, I am at the end. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Amanda, thank you very much. That was a phenomenal presentation. And let me, if it's okay with you, feel free, Rose or Sean, to jump in, because you have so much experience of having talked about this. But one of them, and Pamela, so you can jump in too, because what you said was you understand the issues better than I do. I think that's my editorial comments. But you still have reservations because you're worried about non-English speakers. Pamela, do you want to add to that, what you put in the chat? People can put anything they want in the questions and answers or the chat, and I will go through them all. Or you can raise your hand. That's why I asked Elka to kindly show your pictures. Pamela, go ahead if you want to add to that.
I don't. That's it.
Okay, so anybody, Sean or Amanda or Rose, what about the persons who don't speak English as their first language?
I am happy to field that.
Okay.
So we've actually had some exciting developments in the last couple of weeks. So the Campaign Finance Board and the Board of Elections provide language translations and translators at the polls in languages that are covered by the Voting Rights Act. So that is Spanish, that's Chinese. So the BOE will send Mandarin or Cantonese interpreters to the appropriate polling locations. And in parts of Queens, that's Korean and Bengali. In addition to that, the Civic Engagement Commission runs an interpreter program in the citywide languages, and they identify poll sites where there's a high need for limited English proficient voters, and they send interpreters to those areas. A couple of weeks ago, the mayor did announce an additional $15 million investment in ranked choice voting. So City Hall is working to take all of these materials and translate those into additional languages. So from what I understand, we're going to get up to the top 19 languages that are needed in New York City. And personally, I am hopeful that they will also be directing some additional resources to the interpreter program so that the interpreter program can cover more early voting locations and more languages than what they were originally planning.
That's a real concern. So I hope it gets addressed. I can, particularly for early voting, because sometimes you don't have enough staff with language capacity at the voting site. So let's hope it works out. That's a huge issue.
So in addition to that, I'll jump in and say, we as Rank the Vote have all of our materials available in 13 different languages and have for quite some time. And so we have partnerships with Meals on Wheels, with the Food Bank for New York, and with City Harvest. And so all of anyone who gets a meal from Meals on Wheels will receive some of our explainers or one of our explainers in large print in language delivered to them leading up to early voting. And anyone who gets a food package or a box from the 900 partners that Meals on Wheels has or the 400 partners that City Harvest has, they will also be getting an explainer on ranked choice voting in language as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Sean. Go ahead, Rose, if you want to say.
Sure. Also, I would say, Rank the Vote NYC has been doing a lot of the training in community from all the way since last year and has formed a number of community partnerships representing various ethnicities and groups. And I think those partnerships have only grown I know, for example, NALEO and other organizations that work with the Latinx community have been pretty vigorous on the ground doing outreach. I know Rank the Vote also has organizers in various communities, and there are not-for-profit leaders that are also beginning to reach out. I'm sure Amanda and Sean and our borough president feel this. I know I feel this, and I'm not an expert like the two of them, but I think everybody is beginning to understand that ranked choice voting is happening. It's real, and now everybody is asking for information and training. But many of the resources that are both on the CFB and the Rank the Vote NYC website are extremely helpful, and both videos I find to be really helpful to explain it. But we have to continue to spread the word throughout communities of New York City.
Absolutely.
And our seniors.
Yep, the seniors are at home. I'm worried about them a little bit. But thank you, Sean, for knowing that it's going with Meals on Wheels, etc. So the other question I have on the chat is, again, Amanda, to reiterate, it's for ranked choice voting, the specials, the primary, but not the general. Can you just explain that again? Because apparently on the website, it talks about the race and the election, but it's not clear what race or what election.
Got it. So yeah, and I saw another question about why is it only in some contests and not others? So I'm going to answer both at the same time. So yes, ranked choice voting is only being used in special elections and in primary elections, but not in general elections. As I understand it, based on what we heard from people who are on the Charter Revision Commission and who staff the Charter Revision Commission, there were sort of two reasons why this happened. For some people, they were like, all right, we're willing to try it out in specials and primaries, but maybe not for general elections. I would say the even more practical reason in general elections is that New York City has something called fusion voting. So I'm sure you've all seen this, where candidates can run on multiple ballot lines. So, you know, you can run on the Democratic or Working Families Party line. You can run on the Republican and conservative line. I think this would be kind of a mess with ranked choice voting. People thought it would be too confusing and no one could conceptually understand how that would work. So right now we are just, you know, limiting it to special and primary elections. As for what races that are going to be included, it's the citywide races, mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council, not other offices. The reason for that is that we made this change through the New York City Charter, and those are the elections that are governed by the New York City Charter. Things like district attorney, that is covered by state election law, and that's not something that voters were able to amend with the charter proposals that were on the ballot. So that's why it's just those city offices that are covered.
That's helpful. And then I think I know the answer, but do we scan both sides of each sheet, or does the scanner handle both sides? I know my understanding is when I put it in, it handles both sides, but you might want to correct me or answer it, Amanda. Thank you.
Handles both sides.
That's
Only
what I
have to run it through the machine once.
Yep, okay. One of the issues is, again, these are, Carolyn, if you want to ask it yourself, but can you just show up for early voting? Do you need to fill out a form to do so? It's less of a RCV than more of a voting issue, but go ahead. I think you can just show up for early voting, but people are still confused about that, so.
You can just show up for early voting. Just make sure to show up at your assigned early voting location. So we're all used to voting on election day. You have to go to the place you were assigned. The same is true for early voting.
Maria Luna, go ahead. You know more than anybody, so go right ahead with your question.
Hi, everybody. No, I don't think I know about this one, but I need to clarify. It's on the ballot. They're going to be candidates for mayor and everybody else. If someone fills for mayor, 5 candidates on the same number 1 position, but makes the right decision for the other positions on the ballot, is that ballot disqualified, or does it only disqualify for the error on the top? Follow me?
So the machine should give you an error message that would make sure your ballot doesn't go through until you correct that error.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
If you made that error in an absentee vote where you aren't going to get that immediate feedback from the voting machine, then your your vote for mayor wouldn't count because they can't tell who your first choice votes are meant for. But if you voted correctly in the other contests, your vote would count for those.
Thank you so much.
Just to jump in really quickly on that one, the machine specifically will say there's an error on your ballot. Would you like to fix it? And it's a yes or a no. Now, if you hit yes, it gives you your ballot, you get the opportunity to fill out another ballot. If you hit no, it overrides the system and it will invalidate your ballot for that race. So that's just something for you to be aware of. You have to hit yes, that you would like to change you would like to correct the mistake. And the machine will give you that option.
I hope the people at the polls, Maria, know what they're doing because they're going to be a million calls and questions. Oh my God, I'm glad I'm not going to be a poll worker because that's going to be hell. Excuse my French.
So I will say in terms of education, we're really excited that the privacy sleeve that you get your ballot in will be covered in instructions in ranked choice voting. And when you go into your booth to vote, right in front of you, their kind of privacy wall will also feature instructions on ranked choice voting.
But you should also tell people like, people like me, we like to do it real fast and they should go slowly. Because usually like people like me and Maria, we know what we're doing before we get into the booth. But then now I don't know. So I better go slowly and everybody else better go slowly too. Slow down. Go ahead.
No, sorry to interrupt.
Yes, Rose. No, Rose, go ahead.
So one of the things I also recommend is there are a number of mock elections, I'm sure Amanda, but I know Sean has them. And I think certainly to make sure that those get out far and wide because you do need to practice, right? Especially if you are crunched for time and can't make it to early voting. I don't know, Sean, if we can share that link for the one that's up for this month, but I think it's fun. Also, you can create your own RCV elections, mock elections that you can share with your community groups and your family members and other people that you know are voting so that it gives you that practice as well.
Thank you, Rose. And I actually just shared that in the chat. You all can
give it to us verbally, Sean, too, just so people have it, because not everybody has the chat. So go ahead.
It's too complex to read, but we can email it out to folks as well.
Okay. All right, we would be glad to do that. There are people also, I think this would be for you, Amanda, who are concerned about those who do not have a home and how are we going to get them information on this process and voting.
Sure, that is a great question. So I have a couple answers to that. One, the Department of Homeless Services under the Department of Social Services is what's called a Local Law 29 agency. So those are agencies that have to provide voter registration to their clients and include that as part of frontline services. Those agencies are also now covered by a different local law that requires them to get information out, to like get it on their website, to get it to their service providers. So it's really one of the most effective things we have found is usually coordinating with the Department of Homeless Services to make sure their service providers are aware of these changes and can tell their residents. One of the challenges, like I'll be completely honest, one of the challenges of being in a pandemic is that we do less in-person organizing. Before we would have been able to go into shelters, we have done that where we've registered people to vote and we've had conversations, and there are just limitations on that at this time. So we do really have to rely on agencies to get the word out to service providers, and that's why we're trying to also have as many individual conversations as we can so people can be sure to be talking to people in their own social networks as well.
Okay. I think any of you will know this. Are there any restrictions on obtaining the absentee ballot? I just want to be able to go, just wait in line. You can do that unless there's somebody help me with the absentee ballot. What are the restrictions? I think they were changed in Albany. So either Amanda, Sean, or Rose, go ahead.
Just say you want an absentee ballot and mark temporary illness is the reason.
Right. whether you are or not. That's Gail speaking, so don't,
Yeah.
I could say that, maybe others can, but I've been lying my whole life if it makes it easier for people to vote, you know how I am. And people with disabilities. Now, I've spent a lot of time on this issue. Obviously, we have to be ADA sites. We have to make sure that they can get an absentee if they wish. But if they want to vote, it's, people who have all of the appropriate apparatuses at the voting site, that'll continue.
Yes, that will continue. So we have been working with both with disability rights groups and also with the accessibility coordinator at the Board of Elections. So those conversations are ongoing to make sure that everything is actually like working as it should be, that ranked choice voting is being incorporated into the ballot marking device. So right now those conversations are ongoing, but I am confident that the ballot marking device actually can handle ranked choice voting. I know I've seen some concerns about machines in the chat. So I won't go into how the ballot marking device works too much, but it does accommodate people who have cognitive disabilities, who maybe need more time or explanation to vote their ballot.
I know Susan Dewar will keep you, keep the Board of Elections on their best behavior. Otherwise she'll be in court. What about Braille absentee ballots? Again, this is not you because this is not ranked choice voting, but Braille absentee ballots, is that something that exists? I should know this.
No.
Okay.
It is something.
Lori, thank you for suggesting that. I will certainly look at that. I think that's a great idea, to be honest with you. Something to work on. Okay. If we have multiple pages, is each page identified so nothing gets separated, or is the ballot all attached? Maybe Sean, you know the answer to that too.
I actually think that's an Amanda question.
Okay, all right. I mean, I think the answer is it's separate, and it's pretty clear, but right, Amanda? I mean,
yeah, it is separate. So you'll have to put each page through the machine separately. Make sure you scan both pages.
okay.
But they will give them to you together in a privacy sleeve to vote on.
Okay. David, go ahead, Calvert. I know you since you're born. You got to ask your question. I'm not going to read it for you.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, thanks, Gail. And by the way, this forum is fantastic. I really appreciate it. And, one thing just occurs to me that it really will push people to candidates to go out to the constituencies for the more fringe candidates and recruit them, try to get them on there. So it's really going to be a balancing thing. I really like it. The question I have is has the Republican Party come out against ranked choice in general, and has the Democratic Party in general embraced it? Because that's what it's going to look like in that map that was shown earlier.
Sean, do you know the answer to that, or Rose?
So it's not part of the National Democratic Party platform, and it's not part of the National Republican Party platform. Actually, in Virginia, they are using ranked choice voting, the Republicans, for, I believe it's their gubernatorial nomination. So Democrats use it, Republicans use it. I know some state Democratic parties have adopted it as part of their platform. I have not heard of any Republican parties at a state level that have opposed it.
Well, just to chime in, that it looks like the 75% that voted for it in New York City does represent essentially the same number that is the Democratic registration for New York City, and the 25% that voted against it sort of more parallels the Republican registration for New York City. So just that could be coincidental.
I can share, at least from our exit polling, that kind of backs that up, is it's actually more based on race than party preference. So people of color overwhelmingly prefer ranked choice voting to the old voting method. Non-people of color, not so much. It's about 49 in support to 51 opposed to RCV amongst non-communities of color. So I think that's more so what the map shows than party preference.
That's very interesting, Sean.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very
Interesting.
Carolyn, you should go ahead and ask your question about, because it is scary, what could eliminate your vote?
Right.
Even though you said that, it could be stated, the machine will tell you when you made a mistake, but go ahead, Carolyn.
Yeah, I'm very nervous about that because I know when somebody is really gung-ho for their candidate that they could, make a mistake. But for the first time I heard tonight, thank you very much, that the machine will correct that. Is that correct? Like if you put the your candidate all for number one all the way across.
Somebody needs to mute themselves. Go ahead, Carolyn, sorry.
If somebody puts their favored candidate for maybe all across the, for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the machine will correct that, right? Is there any way that the machine will not help you if you make a mistake? I guess I should put it that way.
So Amanda and Sean and Rose, go ahead. Amanda, go ahead if you want to.
I was looking to Sean, but I would say I just want to address mistakes because, yeah, some people are gung-ho for their candidate and they're like, I love this person so much, I'm going to rank them first, second, third, fourth, and fifth
Right.
choice. That won't invalidate your vote. It's just that only your first choice vote counts. So if your candidate doesn't get to the top 2 and they get eliminated, then your vote is over. Like you don't have a part in electing the eventual winner. The only thing we really, really caution voters about is that overvoting, where you accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, mark more than one person under a specific ranking. And that's the most problematic if you vote for 2 people or more than 2 people for your first choice. So then not even your first choice would count. Like if you voted for 1 person for your first choice and then 2 people for a second choice, your first choice would still count. It's just like if they can't tell what you really intended to do, that's when that vote doesn't count.
Okay, so your vote would count then.
Yeah.
Okay, Sean, do you want to add anything to that? Because people are nervous about that, Carolyn's right.
Yes.
And so, yes, and in that instance, if you are voting in person and you put your ballot in the machine, it will say, there's an error on your ballot, would you like to fix it? And you do have to hit that yes button. Otherwise, the machine, if you hit no, the machine will accept that ballot that has the error on it. And as Amanda said, it'll be invalid specifically just for that race. And so, but keep in mind, that's only if you're voting in person. If you're voting absentee, that you don't have that option of hitting the button on the machine and getting another ballot. So that's just something for folks to keep in mind. But I will say that error rate is very low. It's actually lower than what it is in judicial races, where you're also picking more than one candidate. So in RCV races, what we've seen so far is that exhaustion rate be about 10%, which is on anywhere from 10 to 12%. And that's on par with the national average for exhausted ballots.
Okay. Sean, thank you. Let me just say something funny though. And then Teresa, you should go ahead, and then Penelope. But just Sean, with the judicial in Manhattan, just so you know, it says vote 6 and there are always 6 people. It says vote 5 and there's always 5 people. It's just amazing. I don't mean to get into it. Maria's laughing, but it always seems to add up. And I know why, but the poor voter has no clue. Amanda, go ahead.
Can I just add one more thing, Gail?
Please.
So it's also when you're, if you're living in the borough of Manhattan, understand that you may be voting for a borough president, city council, mayor, comptroller, but for the Manhattan DA's race, they're only picking one person, even though there may be, 7, 8, or 9 candidates listed. So you really have to pay attention for the people that you're talking to who may have concerns. You will need to make time before you go into the voting booth to make sure that you're familiar with what the ballot's going to look like. And also for each of the races, do you vote for 6 if it's judicial, or 5 if it's judicial, and certainly understand for the DA, it's only one choice. And I don't know for public advocate if there's really a challenger, or will it just be the current public advocate? So keep that in mind as well.
Egads. Egads.
Amanda, did you want to add to it, or should I go to Therese?
Oh, I was just going to add, like, I know people are concerned because this is a new method of voting. So everyone wants to make sure that they get it right and they don't make a mistake. I have a slightly different perspective because we talk about overvoting, but overvoting has always happened. You know, it's happened in single choice elections ever since we got that style of ballot, and even back when we had the lever machines. But what we've seen is the rate of overvoting has gone down over time. People don't make that mistake as much because they're getting a lot more education about it. And we've worked with the Board of Elections to make corrections at the poll site so that the machines are giving out these error messages and things like that. So I know people are worried about it, but that's why we tell people, we're like, just be sure to do it correctly. And then once people understand it, they don't make that mistake.
All right, Teresa, go ahead.
Hello there. I would like to ask about the machines themselves. Have the machines always been as clever as the ones that you're discussing right now? I mean, that they can tell you that there's an error message and you better go back and try again and so on. Really, what I'm asking is, do we have to reprogram all the machines? Are we getting new machines, or is there any possibility of some kind of technological catastrophe here? Or am I just imagining this?
I would say that we're using the same machines, first of all. I would also say, yes, the machines have always been this clever and always had the capability. We just haven't used them that way. So, you know, I know people are concerned about tabulation, for example, which actually happens with different software than what's on the machines. You know, these can be programmed this way. They're used in other places this way. We're not overly concerned about the machines, I have to say.
Okay, so that's going to be all right. Now about the poll workers, are all of them going to have to be retrained? And if so, how are you going to get hold of all of them and do this?
They are all being retrained so that they learn about ranked choice voting. We work with the Board of Elections and we've been talking to them. We've actually worked together really closely throughout this process to make sure that, you know, first of all, that we're saying the same things to voters, that we're not giving different messages. And to also make sure that poll workers do know what they're doing. We also, I will say, know a couple people who are going through the poll worker training this week and are waiting to hear the report backs of like how effective that was, just so we can keep an eye on it. But yeah, all of the poll workers are going to be trained in ranked choice voting and learn what that is and get like cheat sheets at the polls.
Maria, is that going to work, Maria? Maria's an expert. Is that all going to work, that training, Maria Luna?
I believe so, because the most of the poll workers are very dedicated. They want to do a good job. So I hope that you know, we don't have any problems. Of course, there's going to be someone at Channel 1 is going to be at the right time, or someone was complaining, or Channel 4 or something like that. But I believe that I trust that you know, everyone is being trained properly, and the retraining is already started, has already started. So,
okay.
And I'll add, the city has already had 4 chances to do ranked choice elections.
Nice.
So there has been, you know, trial and error. Our board chair and my colleague Susan Lerner has been in constant communication with the BOE on things that we've seen at polling sites and that our organizers have seen and that we've heard from poll workers. So we are very optimistic about the training that poll workers are going to get. And to Ms. Luna's point, even in the special elections, reporters tried to get folks to get video or footage of people complaining or people saying it's not working, or I don't understand ranked choice voting, and not a single time were they able to find someone walking out of a polling site saying, it was just confusing and I didn't get it. It didn't happen.
That's fabulous. So one of the questions is, what happens if there's no one with 50% plus one after 5 rounds? Sean, do you want to try to answer that? I don't know.
Yes.
Go ahead.
If it goes down to the final 2 and no candidate has received 50% plus 1, whichever candidate has the most votes wins. So it does not go into a special election or a runoff. There's no second election. Everything is handled there and a winner is decided immediately.
Fabulous. Okay, that's good to know. Matt, somebody wanted to know what company manages the voting machines. I think it's the same company that was there before, Amanda. You can answer that.
Yeah, ES&S is our machine provider.
Okay. Now, Penelope, do you want to talk about this book? Because I don't really understand this library book, but it sounds fabulous. Go ahead.
I'm following up on Rose's comment that people should practice, practice, practice. And one way to do that is that the New York Public Library, together with Gothamist, are trying to determine through ranked choice voting what is the all-time greatest New York City book. And so Elka is going to put the link in the chat and you can go to the site. And funnily enough, there are 13 books, just like there are 13 candidates for mayor. And you're allowed to rank 5 of them. So it's a good way to get practice. So I encourage everybody to go to the site and choose what is, in your mind, the greatest of the 13 New York City books.
That sounds like fun. That's fabulous. So I think Elka put it in. And this chat will be archived along with the discussion tonight. So you can always go back to it. You could go to the New York Public Library and I'm sure they have the same information, but that's a lot of fun. Somebody called, Julia, are you still on, Horn, about the change in apartments and so on and so forth, the registering to vote? It's not really something that I know the answer to. So are you still here?
I'm here.
Okay, so go ahead. Why don't you ask your question about address change?
I just did what Sean had, I'll shout this out to Sean because he answered initially the first question, but I followed the link that he said and logged in with my New York City ID. I have all that stuff. And then I just re-registered to vote. Is that the way that you change your address? Or is, because all I'm trying to do is change my address. I'm a previously registered voter. So is that how I change my address?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, Amanda, okay.
Yes, so you can change your address that way. I'm not sure if you're a DMV customer using a different platform, but the Board of Elections, if you mark that you were previously registered to vote, would find your address or find your current registration to what was at your old address, and then just update the address associated with that registration.
Okay, I've had a lot of problems with address changes due to the pandemic, so just checking on that. And my driver's ID card is also updated, so.
Okay, Julia, I'm a little bit like the glasses half full as opposed to, I'm sorry, the glasses half empty then half full. So either call, double check. Sometimes what I tell people is go to your old address if you have to, just make sure you vote. I have my kids move and I tell the Board of Elections 100 times and I keep getting the same mail. I'm just saying. So you might want to check. I've given up.
Understandable. I think I'm going to be at the same polling site because I'm literally maybe a mile away from my old address.
All right. I'm just saying. I
will double check. Yes, I plan to call them up.
Board of Elections I can't get it across.
I'll get them on the phone and just double check.
Okay. All right. The other question. Go ahead.
Can I
Yes.
say something about people registering again if they have moved? If you see the registration book that we have, the green books, we find, excuse me, that there are the same person registered in the same building 3 times. So let's avoid that.
So that's the more complicated answer that I don't love to give people is the data entry of the voter registration rolls is imperfect. Sometimes they do create duplicate entries for the same person. Another thing I would say, we always tell people check your registration, make sure everything is current before you go to vote. If it is not current, what you can do is go to the address, the polling location for the address where you are supposed to vote. You can vote on an affidavit ballot, and the poll workers will provide that to you if they can't find you in the book. The Board of Elections takes those affidavit ballots and compares them against the people who were eligible to vote in the election. If you're eligible to vote, your vote will be counted, and they will use that affidavit ballot to update your registration. So worst case scenario, you can do that if, you know, filling out a new registration form like didn't actually get the intended effect. One thing I do want to be really clear about, since we're coming into a primary election, this is a mistake voters make all the time. So if you're voting on an affidavit ballot in a primary election, make sure you mark off, if you're voting in the Democratic primary, that you are registered to the Democratic Party. A lot of times voters forget to mark that off, even if they are registered to the Democratic Party, and then their affidavit ballot does not count. So you want to make sure to avoid that.
That's important. I'm a strong Democrat.
Okay. All right. Are there other questions that people have, or is there any things, Sean, that you want to add in terms of your expertise?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just want to quickly share my screen and play a video. So we've talked about how ranked choice voting changes the tone of campaigns. I want to show a video from my hometown of Oakland, California, where some candidates came together and campaigned together under ranked choice voting.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Pam Harris. I'm Nayeli Maxon.
I'm Shane Tao.
We're running for Oakland City Council District 4.
For the past 16 years, this seat has been held by dynamic women.
We are 3 well-qualified candidates for City Council.
We are mothers, public servants, and community leaders.
Pam has 20 years of nonprofit finance experience. She can manage any budget.
Nayeli has worked in the District 4 office. She knows the district's issues inside and out.
Shane has worked for the City Council for 5 years. She has the experience to get results.
We're asking for your support on November 6th.
This is a ranked choice election. Vote for us 1, 2, or 3.
You can learn more about us on our websites.
Vote for positive leadership,
collaborative leadership,
women's leadership.
Isn't that different from what you're used to?
Yes, yeah.
Candidates coming together, saying nice things about each other. I don't know that we're necessarily quite there yet in New York, but I think we're very quickly getting there. And look forward to seeing something like this from candidates in New York City in the near future.
Thank you, Sean. Somebody wanted to know for, I guess, Jessica, will we be sending out the chat so that people have all these links, or will it be, how do people get these links in the future?
Yes, we can send out the chat. Absolutely.
Yep. Send out the chat to everybody who's on the call tonight. I think the only question I have left, which is something that I could help with. I know this is maybe not answerable, but you know, these pain in the neck people who are outside of supermarkets, particularly on the Upper West Side, they want to know what's the strategy. So now sometimes Rose will know the answer to this. Sometimes, because this is not necessarily a campaign finance board question probably, but the issue is because now they tell me, Gail, I have my first choice so-and-so, but I'm supposed to pick the weakest person for number 2. What am I going to do about 3, 4, and 5? Okay, these are people who you know, spend their whole time nuancing about every policy. I don't know the answer to this. Has anybody thought about it, or is this something that I should just tell them to, you know, do it, whatever?
Oh,
I don't. Go ahead.
No, thank you. Thank you for alerting me not to go food shopping anytime soon. So I would say first and foremost, what I think is fantastic about ranked choice voting is that it gives you certainly more choice, but also to pick people that align with your with the issues that matter to you and to your community. I think once you start trying to figure out how to knock somebody out, I think that's a recipe for disaster. And keep in mind, as long as your first choice vote is still making it through each of the rounds, that doesn't impact your second, third, fourth, and fifth choices. So I think less jockeying, more paying attention about what each of these candidates stand for, and to select your candidates accordingly. Because I do think there'll be a lot of cross information, and you know, they may end up, you know, doing something that may hurt the candidate that they really like. So
Sean, go ahead. He's ready to talk, because you know how these people are.
I do.
Definitely. So as someone who's gone through more than a few ranked choice elections in my lifetime, being from the Bay Area, I can tell you at its core, ranked choice voting is about being able to vote your values, being able to vote your heart over your head. So you no longer have to settle on the lesser of two evils or multiple evils. I always talk about my pastor running for city council in Oakland. And, you know, all of us felt like we had to vote for him because he was the pastor, but we knew he didn't have a chance of winning. So I was able to mark him as my first choice, to mark someone else who was more aligned with my values as my second choice, and then still include the person who ended up winning as my third choice. And so being able to vote for someone based on their values and their values aligning with my values really is what ranked choice voting is about.
That makes sense to me. Somebody also wanted to know, Sean, you know, those wonderful 3 women that you showed from Oakland. Has anybody done that here in New York? I haven't heard of it, but maybe you have.
So there haven't been any videos done like that, but we've seen candidates coming together, hosting events together. We've seen candidates for city council. Actually, we've had a couple of districts where all the council candidates have come together and hosted joint ranked choice voting education events. Under the previous system, that would have never happened. You wouldn't have candidates at the same event together talking about an issue, much less doing community education all together with 9 people running for the same seat in one room.
And I think the other thing is those who are doing an endorsement, they can do 1, 2, and 3 also. So they're having a lot of fun doing that, and it takes them off the hook. That's not something that's in the ranked choice voting booklet. Yeah, but it's also something, go ahead, Rose, of interest, I think.
Yeah, sure. A lot of women's organizations have done that, and progressive organizations have ranked their candidates, particularly in the city council races.
Right, that makes sense. All right, I think Jessica or others, I think we have run out of time, but I just want to say you're getting great accolades, the 3 wonderful panelists from the panel, the persons who are in the audience, because this has been really, really helpful. And I think it's allayed some fears of people who are afraid of making mistakes and think that, you know, between this information and the machines, that they will be okay. You know, people take this, we all know, really, really seriously. And particularly in 2021 post-pandemic, people are nervous about making a mistake about the future of our city and, you know, our country, in a sense, being such a large city. So I think that's what, if you've done a lot, but just doing that all by itself, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. And of course, this will reverberate to other people in, you know, our pods or our friends or, you know, our posses, wherever you feel like want to be. So I very much want to thank my friend Rose Pierre, Louis, and I want to thank Sean. Next time I see you, Sean, maybe I don't have to worry so much about being left for the killing, so to speak. And Amanda, Beal, thank you very much for everything that you did. The 3 of you have been phenomenal, and I'm deeply, deeply appreciative. I don't know, Penelope or Jessica, if you want to add anything, but this has been, I've learned a lot, and I think that the audience has too. Jessica, Penelope?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're going to send around the resources that were mentioned in the chat. And certainly, you know, Campaign Finance Board is going to have those videos. And so we just encourage everyone to keep informed and to keep telling people, you know, to watch the videos and to understand the process.
Okay, all right. And I think the book sounds great. I love the program that the public library has in general, but that's a great idea to be able to use that as a rating process to practice. And what I already know which book I'm gonna put first.
Mhm.
All right, thank you
You
all
can
very,
choose
very
mine.
much.
Gail, you
I
can
know,
choose
but I know what
mine.
I'm gonna put first. And then that's the other question, Amanda and Sean and Rose, is it okay just to vote for one person? I get that all the time, but the answer is yes, it's okay to vote for one person. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great evening and much appreciated. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Good night.